Hi everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. Tonight's guest is Rick. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Vic. Good to be here.
Oh, it's great having you. Rick, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Well, I'm a correctional officer in the state of Wisconsin. I work in a maximum institution. I'm part of the EIU team there. I've also trained dogs for about 20 years on all phases of training dogs, between police work, search and rescue, narcotics, apprehension, you name it. I've used dogs for many years in different security purposes. Love wildlife. Love being in the outdoors with my dogs. Do a lot of hiking as well. But besides that, that's about it.
It sounds like you stay pretty busy, Rick.
I try to.
Yeah, sounds like it. As we're going to talk about tonight, you've had 5 Dogman encounters. What is it about Dogmen you find most unnerving?
The way they go about their day-to-day activities on the property, the way they look at you, the way they just stand there and just observe you. Being observed by a dog man isn't the best feeling in the world.
Did all of your encounters happen at your home or did they happen in different places?
No, all the encounters that I've had have been all on the property.
Considering all of your encounters have happened at your property, have you ever thought about moving?
I have at some point, but also I love the property where I'm at. We have a dog training club there, so to move would be something that you really have to think about and decide. Because they haven't done or acted aggressively, I really have not gone that far as to say, well, I want to move. But time will tell, depending on their reaction.
Well, picking up and moving is easier said than done, so yeah, I can understand why you haven't made that decision yet. How rural is the area where you live?
It's farmland. Your nearest neighbor might be as close as half a mile to a mile away. You have a lot of cornfields, patches of woods. I live next to the Horicon Marsh. Obviously, the Horicon Marsh here in Wisconsin is all marsh. You got patches and islands of woods and a lot of wildlife.
Do you know about the history of Dogman encounters that have happened in the Horicon Marsh?
But I've heard different tales on the Horicon Marsh. I've heard different situations with the DNR, finding caves with bones in them, stuff like that. So I've heard 2 or 3 things about weird situations happening in the Horicon Marsh.
Yeah, I don't know why, but a boatload of encounters have been reported from that area. Do you have any opinions on why the Horicon Marsh would be such an ideal place for them to live?
Well, it's great. I mean, you have a lot of wildlife, areas to hide. It's a very big area. There's some parts in the Horicon Marsh where people can't go in. So it's easy to hide. It's a buffet with water. I believe that's the best place for them to be.
Yeah, it does sound like it'd be the perfect habitat for them. Like you said, you work in a maximum security prison as a correctional officer. Have you experienced anything at work that affected you as strongly as when you had your first Dogman encounter?
I can't really say I have had an experience that has affected me as well. Obviously, working in the maximum security and being part of the EIU team, you have situations where your adrenaline spikes, but nothing the way when you have a dog man stare at you in your own property.
Yeah, that would be pretty hard to compare anything to, I understand. Before you tell us about the encounters you've had, your next door neighbor's had more than one encounter of his own. What has he told you about his experiences?
Well, he's had, I think he was the one that brought him over. His experience started before mine. Him and his wife one night decided to go on a hike. Where I live, there's a trail that actually leads into the Horicon Marsh. They went out hiking on that trail. It's close to the house, so it's not that far away. On the way back from that hike, they heard footsteps paralleling them on the wood lines. At first, he flashed, didn't see nothing. They continued to walk, and the footsteps got closer. At one point, obviously, him and his wife especially got scared, so they tried to hurry up to get out of the trail and back into the road that leads to the house. So when they finally got to the road, He says that he heard clicking noises, and I had asked him, what clicking noises do you mean? What does it sound like? So the first thing he said was they sounded like a dog that has long nails when it clicks on cement or pavement, which was interesting for me because I'm familiar with Bigfoot, but that little detail has, for me, nothing to do with Bigfoot. So it spiked my curiosity. He said he heard some yips howls as he was on the road headed home. Again, during all this time, he was actually flashing his lights back, and he doesn't see nothing. So again, I'm thinking coyotes, wolves, because we do have wolves in the Horicon Marsh. And he mentioned that he saw 5 sets of eyeshine. 4 were greenish yellow, amberish kind of color, and the other was red. So out of the blue, something told me to ask him, well, how high were the eyeshine? What I'm thinking is to tell me how high, so I would know if it was a coyote or a wolf. And he proceeds to tell me that the eyeshine that he saw were about 6.5 to 7 feet tall because they were higher than he was. Well, off the bat, there's no wolf that stands on 4 at 6.5 to 7 feet tall. So that threw my mind off, really sparked my curiosity. After he saw that, he heard some howls again, sounded like between a hyena, wolf type, some laughter howl. It's hard for him to describe it, or for me to describe it as well. I did ask him to listen to some Bigfoot howls, and he, off the bat, said, no, those aren't it. You know, at this time, I've never had asked him or talked to him about Bigfoot or Dogman. I just had a curiosity, you know. So after having him listen to the Bigfoot howls, he said no. So then I brought up some howls of supposed Dogmen from the North American Dogman Project. And the minute he heard one of the howls, his eyeballs just got big and his hairs just stood up. You can see the expression in his face of bringing him back to that moment. And off the bat, I knew this is what he heard. So I had told him, you know, well, I didn't want you to say this was it. I tried to describe it to him in a very sensible way, in a way that he wasn't so fearful, or obviously you don't just tell somebody, oh, that was a dog, man, you know, a dog that stands on 2 legs to describe it. So you try to be able to describe it without him, quote, unquote, ridiculing me. So he was intrigued, but that ended that moment. He had another Dogman encounter where he parked his truck from the back of his house, from the front of his house, sorry, to the front to the back of his house. And when he parked it on the back, he saw some grass movement, and he noticed a brownish gray Dogman sitting in the grass looking at him. He didn't get off his truck, obviously. He fell asleep in his truck, I guess, waiting for it to leave. When he finally did wake up, it wasn't there, so he got out of his truck and went back inside the house. But before that, he had a face-to-face encounter, which, once that happened, it threw all our thoughts into one motion, one thought. In our house, we have our trash day is on Wednesdays. When it's a holiday, then the trash day comes on Thursday, one day later. Well, he took his trash. He wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, or he leaves to work at 2 o'clock in the morning. So he takes out his trash at that time. He puts his trash in the back of his pickup truck, drives off to the corner of the street and the driveway. Now, it's a long driveway, so it's not just coming out of the garage and into the street. You gotta drive out. He parks, walks around the truck to grab the trash from the back of the pickup, and he sees the lights flickering in the front. Not knowing what it was or what it could probably be, he just ignored it and continued walking towards the front of the pickup truck to drop off his trash. When he dropped off his trash and turns around to go back to the truck, he's face to face. He tells you probably about 10 feet maybe to what he described. Was funny because that same day he comes to me and he's like a little kid trying to express something that he saw, and he described it as a wolf on steroids with a coyote head. So I'm thinking, well, maybe it was just a coy wolf. But then so I had asked him, well, how tall was it? Well, it's tall. And well, how tall was the head towards you? It was like, to my chest. Now he's 5'9", so we're pretty much over 4 foot where his head stood. That threw me off because obviously there's no wolf or coy wolf with a head that high up. He begins to describe that it looked like a bodybuilder with huge forearms and very wide, very muscular. So I asked him what, they didn't have a lot of hair. He said, no, he had hair like a wolf, but the muscles were so large and so defined, you can see it through the hair. I have a bulldog, which is very muscular, very, large hind legs, and every time my bulldog would move, because he was on a tie out outside, he goes, he had bigger hind legs than your bulldog. He had more muscles than your bulldog. So it's throwing me off because at the moment I wasn't thinking Dogman, I'm thinking wolf, but every description said otherwise. So I asked him, what did he do? He just stood there looking at me. That's it? Just looked at you? Like, yes. He was just staring me down. At one point, he said that he kind of started yipping and kind of howling, but he just stood there. He gave a description of him having a slight hump on his neck, massive, very muscular. He said that his front legs were like looking at a mountain lion or a lion. Obviously, they were very thick. Now, he, since then, has been able to talk a lot about the Dogman. It has kind of unnerved him. His wife probably has different thoughts of what the Dogman is. So he doesn't talk to it freely, but here and there, so often, I get more details from that specific night. He also mentions, to ask him, did he have hands or paws? Now, obviously, this had begun before me seeing what I saw. So he mentions that he saw one nail on the front, giving the impression that his knuckles were down or his fingers were facing inwards. And that was his second face-to-face encounter with a Dogman. He also has seen them, because he likes to go out sometimes at nighttime and just sit in the bonfire. We have a little bonfire, so he'll sit there by himself sometimes, drink coffee or whatnot, something that we do together sometimes, but this night he was by himself, and he saw one cross our yard, big flash of black, and then on the opposite side, he begins to see 4 eye shines, which in the initial, there were 5. So that brought, obviously, little different questions towards us to find out where's the 5th one. Is it a female? Is it pregnant? What happened to her? Because there was always 5 eye shines, and he saw 4. He also has had his pickup truck with paw prints on top of his bed of his pickup truck. And the paw prints are way bigger than any of our dogs. So obviously they've been on top of his bed as well. And those pretty much are his encounters. We had one encounter together, 2 encounters together, sorry. One was also in the yard. It was more daytime. And the other one was with me on the bonfire one night. That's pretty much it with him.
Please tell us about the experience you two had around the bonfire.
Well, there was one night. It was a Friday or Saturday night. They've been coming around mostly every weekend. Sometimes maybe they'll skip a weekend, or I won't say they skip a weekend, but we don't notice things. Doesn't mean they're not there. But as usual, we went outside. We had coffee. We had some cheese, and we're just looking at the bonfire. At one point, we've heard thumping sounds. Now, the thumping sounds, the best way I can describe them would be if you hear the pitter-patters of a dog on a carpet when it's running. We heard those, so we knew something was up, but we continued talking, continued drinking coffee. And then we heard them again, but again, and we continued doing what we were doing. I have a Belgian Malinois, which is in a 10 by 10 cage. She's going back and forth, sometimes barking towards the cornfields. She'd relax a bit, and then she'd have to get back up, and she'd start pacing. She's from working lines. All her descendants are police dog, actually working as police dog. She's already hyper as it is, and she was off the chart hyper, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. At one point during the nighttime, she starts barking, but behind us. I had flashed my light towards her to see, in what direction she was barking, whatnot. And my neighbor all of a sudden decides to flash forward to what she was looking at. There's a particular Dogman that is black with white coming down from both sides of the ears, and it meets up in the chest. He was coming from the front of the yard towards the back. Now, in his direction, he would have never seen us on the back side with the bonfire until a certain point. I think at that certain point is when the dog actually realized that it was coming towards us, barked. We had flashed the lights at it. So it turned around and kind of scurried back into the bushes, into the cornfield. Then that night, because of that, me and my neighbor switched our seats around. So I was facing his back, and he was facing my back. That way we can see each other's backs pretty much. During that night, this was a kind of interesting or funny scenario. We have 2 stray cats that my wife has fed since we've been there, so they've gotten used to being next to the house and at the door. That night, after we saw the black one, and we knew they were around because of the footsteps in the cornfields, the cat passed us and goes towards the directions of the back field. And it didn't take her very long when she started running, hurrying back towards us and towards the door. And it was funny, one of the comments I mentioned to my neighbor was, I wonder what he saw, because he was just, you can see his demeanor was scared. You know, he literally just scurried back towards the house. At one point, me and my neighbor were talking now that there's a shed with a metal door in front of the bonfire. We heard a rock hit the shed. Me and my neighbors looked at each other, and I've learned through both hiking at work, through the familiarities of Bigfoots, not to look at what's in front but behind you. So I looked the opposite direction from where the rock came. Silence. All right, we kept on talking again. We kept on drinking our last coffee. Now, there's a lot of coffee we drink. There's a mugs that we have outside, so we sip those slowly. Again, we have another rock then thrown at the shed. And again, we looked at the opposite direction. So apparently he didn't like, and I say he, referring to the Dogman, he didn't like the fact that we were looking toward where the rock was being thrown. We heard a grunt and a growl and the scurrying away. When we heard the grunt and the growl, obviously me and my neighbor looked at each other. By then it was about 2:30. We left the bonfire on and we got inside. And that was that night.
Well, I've got to say, you two don't scare easily. Most people would have been inside the moment they had a clue something was going on at all.
With the things that we've learned since they've been here, we will treat them as ranked dogs. So running away in fear is something a ranked dog or a pet dog would look as weaknesses. Although we respect them and we acknowledge their presence, we don't want to look like we're weak or are scared. Hence, we have just learned to ignore them. And that night, we did the same thing as we always do. We know they're there, but I'm not running. At certain times, we have enough common sense to say, okay, this is enough, let's go inside. But not at the first instance.
Well, I'm glad you're able to stay so composed whenever they come around. Another time the two of you were talking outside when you saw a black dog man. What's the story behind that sighting?
My father had arrived from Massachusetts. He was on vacation. And they were outside. In the summertime, bonfires are very common. Because we live in the Horicon Marsh, close to Horicon Marsh, there's a lot of mosquitoes. So that day, there was a lot of mosquitoes. Too many to be outside. So at one point, my father went inside. I went outside, and me and my neighbor were, talking and whatnot, and he was going to go inside too because there were just too many mosquitoes. So he had taken a bucket of water, and he threw it on top of the fire. Now, we know when you take the water and you throw it on fire, it does this whoosh sound. Apparently, that sound startled the Dogman. The Dogman was at the opposite side of the yard. We have a lot of tall grass there because the field is only cut to a certain point. And then the rest of it is probably burned every summer or spring. But it had grown up a bit, so she was squatted down on that spot. When he heard the whoosh and the smoke that comes out of it, he stood up. Now, that time we're both looking at him. He's looking at us. He's looking side to side. And then decides to run on 2, past the field. He gets on 4. Then he gets on 2. And then he gets back on 4 to leave the site, the area, back into the woods or the trail that leads to the Horicon Marsh. Now, me and my neighbor, at that time, we were beside ourselves. You get this adrenaline rush. So we decide, I'm going to say this, we were dumb at the moment, but we learned something in the process. We grabbed our flashlights and we went on the road towards the trail. And when we got to the trail, I'm telling my neighbor, look up on the trees, look to the bushes, let's see if he goes down the trail. It was a curiosity thing to know, does he really take the trail down completely, or does he just take the woods? when we got to that part, there's too many bushes, there's too many trees, and I got kind of unnerved, and something inside of me told me, head back. If he comes out, you won't be able to see him. So with that thought in mind, I told him, let's just go back, because if this guy decides to jump us, he's covered completely, and there's bushes on both of our sides. Because on the trail ain't that wide. So we turned around, headed back home. When we got home, by then, now it's summertime, so when we saw him, it's about 8:30, so it's still light outside. When we finally got back to the house, it's kind of twilight. You can still see, but the sun has already left, so all you have is the light from the glare of the sun. It's pretty much shadows. So I'm on the side of the house. I had just put one of my dogs inside, and I see this black flash coming from the opposite side of the field, coming into our property, and then you see him, at least the outline of him, grabbing the tree while looking with half of his face at me. At that point, we're staring at each other, and he just stared at me. I mean, it was obvious he did not like the fact that we went following him. I called my neighbor, and I turned around to make sure he was coming, and I turned back. He was gone. It was like he vanished into thin air. He was no longer there. That's when we kind of figured out that following them or chasing them was not a good idea, because he actually ran, crossed the road, onto the property, and just stood there and just stared at me. So that gives us some insight of what not to do with the Dogman.
You say that black Dogman has a unique way of looking at you. Please tell us more about that.
Well, he looks at you with a, as we call it at work, a 1,000-mile stare. He tries to look past you. It's something that we are trained to look at work with inmates. And it's a stare that kind of reflects, when you see it, something's going to go down. Something's going to go happen. Rank dogs also give you that stare sometimes when they don't know you. It's just a stare of, I'll say neutrality, but ready for action. He's just like waiting for somebody to make a false move, like on his toes, but I'm here, don't push it, type of look.
Yeah, it's bad enough getting that 1,000-yard stare from a person, let alone a Dogman.
Yes, it is.
Do you have any idea why he kept switching back and forth between running bipedally and quadrupedally that night?
The best guess that I had at seeing him, it was to catch speed. I know that when he ran from the field, obviously there's grass. The grass is probably as high as me, maybe, at that time. So it'd be logical to run across the field where the grass is on two legs so he can still see us. When it hit where the cornfield is at, the cornfields at that time weren't that tall. So going on fours, he would still have been able, at his height, to turn his head, which he did, to look at us. So I think when he went on fours, it was to cover more distance. Then he got back on two, just because he had covered the distance and looked back at us. But then he hit the four again when he hit the woods and the trail. So to me, it was just to get distance, to get speed. The day that we saw him run on fours, I mean, fast doesn't describe it. Lightning fast is more like it. It's like looking at a Ferrari or a Lamborghini going from 0 to 60. So I'm assuming that he went from 2 because he was able to see us better to 4 because he gets catching speed. And then when he caught the speed and was far off enough, then he was comfortable enough to go back on 2. That's my guess at why that happened.
Well, that does make sense. You just might be right on that. Were any of your dogs out there with you that night? If so, how were they acting when all this was going on?
That night, I have a Belgian Malinois. Again, she's very hyper. Her family descendants are police dogs, actual working police dogs in Holland and in the United States. So she's always hyper, but during this time, she was extremely hyper. I mean, she was literally bouncing off one side of the kennel to the other side of the kennel and back and forth, and antsy is the best way to describe it. A lot more than what she normally is. So she was really not at ease being where she was at. She knew something was up. She knew there was something around her, and she wasn't going to let it rest. He tends to go low to the ground, so we were never known that he would have been behind us unless she would have barked.
That wouldn't have been a good situation. You found tufts of fur on your neighbor's truck one day. What's the story behind that?
Well, one night he went to work and he found the tailgate open on his pickup truck. Now, to this day, he cannot remember if he left it open or if he left it closed. He thinks he left it closed, but he really can't say. Well, he had gone to work, and at work, they asked him if he had killed something in the back of his pickup truck. And he goes, no, what do you mean? So he goes to look, and sure enough, when he looked, there was tufts of grayish fur on the back of the pickup truck and huge paw marks, both on the tailgate, which he had found open before he went to work, and on the bed. So because of the paw prints, obviously my dog's paw prints I know very well. But when I asked him, how big were the paw prints, he just opened his hands and said, the size of my hand. So they were huge. So apparently the Dogman had caught something and was chewing on it when he was on the back of the pickup truck, or had it in his hands when he was back there, which released the tufts of fur. We don't know. And he washed it off at his job site, but the evidence of the paw prints and the tufts of fur were there. So they obviously have enough curiosity to go on top of the pickup truck. Since he can't remember if he left the tailgate open or not, we're still on a, did they open the tailgate or was it left open?
Well, as I'm sure you know, they can definitely open tailgates, so that's not out of the realm of possibility.
Right, that is for sure.
What did you do with that tuft of fur? Did you send it in to be analyzed?
No, because my neighbor is, right now, he's kind of shaken up. As the day passes by and he thinks, he dwells on what he's seen, he gets more shaken up as it is. So that day, obviously, all he did was wash it off the pickup truck and clean it off. Like I said, once in a while I'll get some information here and there of stuff that he continues to see or has seen during the nighttime, but it's nothing that he talks about it freely. I know that his wife thinks it's a demon, and whether he believes his wife or not, he has told me, well, obviously, I've seen it too, but for him it's very scary. It's scary seeing the expression that Dogman gives you. It's scary to see something so big, so muscular in front of you. And to know that every time you walk out at nighttime, they could be looking at you. So he doesn't have to talk a lot about it. So the idea of wanting to collect evidence or take pictures or whatnot is not in his mind. He just wants to go about his life and not be bothered.
Yeah, it definitely changes things when you know they're around. All right, Rick, you've had quite a few encounters of your own. Please give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Well, the first time that I realized something was in the property, it was the beginning of June. I walked out. Now I have 2 cans on the backside, so I always have a headlamp on my head because we don't have night lights in the front of the roads, and the only spotlight that we have on the house is in the front of the house, not towards the back. So I always have a spotlight on me. I went to go get some bottles of water from back of my car, and when I'm walking there, I noticed eye shine. But because we have 2 stray cats, the first thought in my mind is just a stray cat. But then it is obvious that the eye shine is a lot larger. And when I say larger, I'm talking about larger than my dog's eye shine at nighttime. One dog is 75, the other dog is 80 pounds. So they're not small dogs. And these eye shines were bigger. So I did a double take and I looked at it. Now I turned on my headlamps to an attempt to see the outline of what it was. Now, one of the reasons that I thought it was a cat at first is because it was very squatted to the floor, like flattened out. I tried going forward to see, because it was far enough where all you saw was his back shadow and just the eye shine. That's it. And it decided to step back from me or from the light. So, okay, I wasn't going to go chasing after it at that particular moment, so I went back, popped the hood of the car, grabbed the water. Something told me he's still coming. So I turned around, and sure enough, he had taken 2 or 3 steps forward towards me. So, again, the curiosity of what the heck is this? So I went forward and went backwards. During this process, I'm still trying to figure out what it was. He got to a tree, And when he got to the tree, he, I'm going to say, grabbed the tree. So now his eye shine is probably about 4, 5 feet off the ground. So it seemed like if he was like on his hock sitting down while still grabbing the tree. I continued to go forward because now that sparked my curiosity on what the am I looking at. So still I can only see eye shine, some outline, but it was a very dark night that night. So if it's full moon, no clouds, you're good. You can see better. But that night, there wasn't a full moon and you had some clouds, so a little bit darker. It rose up the tree, and when it went up the tree, you hear branches snapping off. So at that point, my mind was telling me that's no cat. Cats are not that heavy to snap branches off. And I saw it go up the tree and stop at one of the branches on top. And from up there, you can clearly see the eye shine. I mean, and they were huge, just staring me back. So I think I grabbed the bottles of water, brought them in the house. I opened my knife and I went back outside. When I went outside, it was no longer there. It was gone. I tried to contact some of my friends that are avid hunters, and because the eye shine was so big, you know, their first impression was black bear or mountain lion, especially it climbing the trees. Now, in the morning, there was chunks of bark that had been removed on that side of the tree going up, which Donna Fink, an investigator, had seen as well. That was that night. That was on a Saturday. I talked to my neighbor on a Sunday. He tells me of what he saw on that Friday, Thursday. So what I saw was actually after his situation. When you brought them home, they followed you home. But again, he had seen the Dogman face to face before I was able to see the second encounter that I had. And this encounter, again, they come around every week, every weekend, give or take. So this night I went outside and I let go of my bulldog. Now I'm a third shifter, so if I'm going to work on third shift, normally I do everything before I go to work around 9:30. If I'm not working, I still do everything at nighttime because I'm a third shift and I'm used to doing things at nighttime. So I go out and I let the bulldog go. The bulldog goes into the house, his normal routine. As I'm walking towards the entrance of the house, I see two very large eye shines looking at me. I keep walking. At one point, I stop to stare. One of the things that crossed my mind was, is this the mailbox? Does it have reflectors? Is that what I'm looking at? Until, as I got closer, it blinked. And when it blinked, I knew, oh, this is an animal. Because I had bought brighter headlamps, and since then I've bought brighter and brighter and brighter. But when I was looking with the headlamps, which I turned it to really bright, I saw my mailbox, which is white, and the eye shines was parallel to the mailbox. Now I can see the outline of something. Now there's a little detail that from the road to the property, there's a big ditch. If I were to stand on a ditch to where the eye shine was, it's easily 6.5, 7 feet tall, give or take. If I'm standing at the road to where the eye shine was, it's 4 feet. So again, there's no way this is a wolf, and I'm seeing a very muscular outline, very wide outline. So I hurried, got my bulldog inside, and I again holstered my knife. I don't have weapons, I have a compound bow and knives. So I holstered my knife, went outside towards it. Now I've already heard my neighbor describe it, but because of the job that I have, we're trained to run into danger. So one, not seeing 100% sure of what it was, not knowing that detail, I wanted to know what it was I looking at. So again, most wouldn't have done this, but I walked towards the road. And walking towards the road, I had footsteps on the opposite side of the bushes. Now, our long driveway, there's a part where there's grass to my left, then there's bushes, and then the cornfields start right there. I heard movement. So when I hear movement, I turn my head, and sure enough, the eye shines were still looking at me. This time I can see it wasn't standing up completely, but it was kind of sloped down, so So now the eye shine is probably 5 feet high off the ground with a slope because he's not standing up straight. And he proceeds just to stare at me. And we stared back at each other. At one point, I remember, because as a dog trainer, I've dealt with a lot of aggressive animals. And even at work, when you're dealing with situations, you tend to talk to yourself or talk in a calm voice. When you're dealing with aggressive dogs and you talk to yourself in a calm voice, it makes you able to concentrate or relax yourself. And at the same time, it comes out neutral towards the dog. It's like when you talk with a smile, it sounds polite. If you talk with a grin, it sounds kind of distorted and like if you were mad. So I said in a normal voice, not because I thought I understood, but simply I said, I don't care if you're here, just leave my dogs and me alone. I proceeded to walk backwards because I had another dog I had to take out. So I went back to the kennel, took her out, brought her inside. And then again, I walked forward back to where I was the first time. I heard the rustling. At this time, I did not hear the eye shine, but a sense of look around you, pivot your head. So I started looking at my 6, at my 12, at my 9 to see if I had anything else coming from either side. And because I couldn't see him, I could only hear his footsteps. I walked backwards to the house and I went inside. And that was the second time. Third time was obviously the day we and my neighbor were outside. That one, he likes to come in low to the ground like a cat does, which is very eerie or scary because his appearance is that of a cat, so it kind of throws you off. One night I was also walking up towards my dog once again, let him out, put him into the house, and as I get to the kennel, I look towards my left, and he pops up from the tall grass, looks at me, and I have my headlamps on, which is, at this point, even more brighter. We kind of realize that he doesn't like the bright lights. I've heard stories where Dogman is out in the daytime, and that's fine. But I believe, and through the stuff that we do in our house, I believe that once night falls, they're very sensitive to light. Hence why they try to stay away from the light. So I've been buying brighter headlamps and brighter flashlights as I go out. I can see his outline. I can see the reflection of his white on his chest. He's looking at me. I looked at him, opened the door of the kennel. My dog hadn't noticed him yet. He decides to walk forward where he's at and into the cornfields. And I just told my dog inside, and my dog runs back inside the house. We've seen him one night on the opposite side again. He's always around. You either hear him, see him, rather on the opposite side of the cornfields or next to the trees. Since then, like I have mentioned, I've bought brighter flashlights. I think I went from 250 to 1,000 lumens. And I've told my wife, if you're bringing the dogs, make sure the dogs are inside before night falls. When I go outside, I always check the tree lines and check the trees on top of me. But besides those, he's always there. He's either there with noises in the woods or he's there without noises in the woods. You kind of always understand that he's there. There was one part when my father arrived from his vacation, we had a small house fire. So before he came, I had to fix the floor and change the cabinets before he got there. So one night, obviously, I waited for my neighbor to come home. I don't have a pickup truck. We went to get the materials. I changed the floor, changed the cabinets. I put the old cabinet outside. Now, on the back side of the house, you don't have spotlights, which I'll definitely be able to get one soon for the back. But I went out back, and I went to get a blade that I had inside the cabinet, which I forgot inside there when I took it out. All you're able to see is the reflection of the lights from inside the house. You can't see much out. And that day, again, it was cloudy, so it was pitch black. When I got to the cabinet, it was the first time that I felt a strong feeling of dread, of fear. Something was telling me, run, get out, now. I remember looking behind me, looking to the side of me. Now, I had the house on my 3 o'clock, so I started looking from 12 all the way down to 6 on the opposite side. 12, 11, 10, 9, because that feeling was there. I remember closing my eyes, intently saying to myself, don't run, don't move, just stay put. I opened my eyes, I looked forward because the feeling was really coming from ahead of me. It's weird because it's like you know that the feeling is coming from in front of you. And again, in a calm voice, I said out, not out loud screaming, but enough for it to be heard, knock it off. I am not running. This is my house. I went to get the knife, and shortly after that, before I even moved from the cabinet, the feeling left me. Obviously, I walked backwards, close to the wall, tall, but I walked backwards and got into the house. I remember sitting down. There's a lip before you go outside because we have double doors, and there's a lip there. Sitting in that lip for a couple of seconds while the feeling, left me completely. But then again, because of the situation, I realized something, that standing tall and being calm throws off that feeling. That was the one night that my nerves were just flipped. But it went away with being calm, being direct, but neutral. It went away. And those are pretty much the ones that we've had, that I personally have had by myself in the property, besides the ones that we've had with the neighbors.
Standing tall when you've got a dogman staring you down, that's a lot easier said than done, but I'm glad you're able to do that. Do you think somehow, some way your training at work is responsible for why you've had all these experiences without any more problems than you've had with them?
I think yes, most definitely, because through the times, like I said, I've dealt with many aggressive animals, dogs that snap, dogs that have medical problems that are aggressive, dogs that have been badly bred are aggressive. So being able to understand body posture, behaviors, has helped me look at their body posture, the way they walk, the way they look at you, and be calm about it. Yes, they're big. Yes, they're powerful. Yes, they are scary. But besides the training of where I work and the years of dealing with aggressive dogs, my first reaction, it's a trained reaction. You're going to act this way because of this. So because of those times in training and those times in when I work at and have worked, my first response is to act this way, not the opposite side. And it definitely has helped be able to control my nerves, understand aspects of what they might do or not do, and be very attentive at little details that bothers them, that sparks their curiosity towards the things that we've done and that happens in the yard.
You handled that last experience well when you stood tall, but do you have any regrets on how you handled other experiences you had with them?
Well, the day we went after him, obviously we weren't trying to go after him to hurt him or anything. We just wanted to see where he went, what trail, what path that he took, if he did take one. But obviously we wanted to catch up to him, so we kind of ran towards the direction that we did, and it must have seemed like we were pursuing him. By him actually coming back, running the way he did, crossing the road, running into the property and staring at me, might have not been the best choice at that time. If I would have gone back, I would have not have gone after him. Many things could have gone wrong. He would have gotten pissed. He literally came back into the property while I'm still looking at it. So I would have done that differently, most definitely.
That didn't sound like the best move to make, but it sounds like all the other experiences you've handled them really well.
I try. You're a nervous wreck afterwards.
Oh, I'm sure you are. It goes without saying. Anybody would be. You mentioned a bit ago that Donna Fink, a Dogman researcher who was featured on episode 11 of the show, came to your property and investigated. What did she have to say about what she found?
Well, she's found a lot of evidence of, when I tell her, well, he was over there, and he did this. Well, she'll come and look, and sure enough, you have the indents, you'll have the bark coming out. There was one night, which I forgot to mention, which Donna came for. I was out, brought in my dog. Where I live, close by, there's a little town. There's some houses. It's not a big town. It's a little town. There's a tower there, a light tower. So one night I see lights from the tower. They look kind of the same, amber string looking, but closer to the height of the cornfield. And I realized, wait a minute, There's no tower there at this height. What the heck is this? And I realized they were coming towards me. I went, again, holstered my knife, and I kind of walked out towards the driveway, towards the road. By that time, I'm trying to figure out where these eye shines go because they were tall. And I began to see them level to the road. Now again, although we know that they're around, our first reaction and thought is, oh, it's probably the cat, or this, probably this. Oh, and although you're saying that, the other part is saying, no, because the eye shines are way too big. But nonetheless, because it was looking at me, the eye shines were looking at me, I looked at him, I didn't go further than where I was standing when I first spotted him. I stood there, so in my mind, it's just probably the cat, probably too low, so I'm not seeing the full eye shine and whatnot. And I walked away. I went home. Now, I'm a third shifter. I take overtime on second shift. So the next day, when I went out to go to work, I slowed the car down where I saw the eye shine, and sure enough, there's an indent of grass that would fit two of me. And I'm not 130 pounds. I'm 210, 215, depending on which day I wake up on. But you fit two of me in there, it's a big hole, very large indent. So off the bat, that throws anything that could be a raccoon or a cat. And Donna, I think, was able to come and see that. She has yet to see the Dogman in the property, but sure enough, she has seen the evidence that they leave behind. Every time I talk to her, text her, hey, listen, they did this or that. She's come over, she's seen what I've been telling her of the evidence that they have been there.
Yeah, Donna's a great lady. She really knows what she's doing when it comes to dogmen too, so I'm so glad that you reached out to her and she came out. That's good to hear.
Yeah, she's a very good person. I enjoy talking to Donna. Once something's happened in the house, I'll give her a text, say this happened or that happened. We have open communication.
Well, you're definitely in good hands if she's on the case. You said Don actually came to your area to talk with another Dogman eyewitness and had some interesting info to share with you that blew you away, actually. What did she tell you?
Well, it was interesting. Donna came in one afternoon after talking to other eyewitnesses from Dogman in the Horicon area. Quite a few distance away. I'd probably say 20 miles away, give or take. At 55 miles an hour, you're a good distance from my house. She got home and she goes, hey, Ricky, how you doing? And then we're talking and says, hey, have you ever talked to so-and-so? And I go, no. Have you ever met with her? No. What's up? Are you sure you have never talked to her when it comes to this and that? No, I have not. What do you mean? She goes, well, she says she saw 4 eye shines, which were average greenish color and 1 red. And that kind of perked me up because that's the same thing that my neighbor saw, which was the 4 eye shines were greenish, yellowish, amberish eyes and 1 set of red. Interesting. And then she goes, and you know what else is awkward or interesting? What? In her encounter, she's seen the 5, and there's 1 that is black with the white coming down from the ears to the chest. That just blew my mind. Because it's the same description as the dog that's in our property, miles away from us. That just freaked me out. And then she also says, and she's always with a brownish gray one. And sure enough, in our property, there's 5, but you always see them together. The black one with the brownish gray one. So that made me flip. It's like, what? And my hair stood up. It's like, very interesting information.
Oh, I'd say it is. That black Dogman with those white stripes, he sure does seem to make his way around, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. He's very curious. When you say curiosity kills the cat, I think curiosity makes him do things that others might not do. Maybe he's young, but he's very curious.
Yeah, I'd say he must be. And speaking of that Dogman, you've been in contact with Art Morones, who was our guest on episode 166 of the show. Something he shared with you got your attention too. What did he have to say that caught you off guard?
Well, in that show, I've listened to your show before, and as I've mentioned, I study what people say. I don't just listen to the show. I study what they say, how they say it, to try to figure out not only our dogmen, but try to figure out their behavior patterns, if it's possible, stuff like that. And in that show, somewhere, I can't remember quite what time, maybe the 15-minute mark or something like that, he was talking about that he was at a road, 2-lane highway, 55 miles an hour, in his truck, and he saw two dogmen, and he tried to stop, but he couldn't because it was a two-lane highway. But then he gave the description of those two dogmen, and the two dogmen were at a house, and the description was black with white coming down from the back of his ears to his chest, and he was with a brownish gray one. I stopped, rewind that spot over and over again, and my mind just blew. Hence why I had to talk to Moronis to find out where that was at. So that same night, I went on a hunt to Moronis to find who he was, which I found him, and we've had multiple conversations. And what's interesting is that where he saw those two dogmen were at over 103 miles away from where I live. That in itself is very interesting information because you know the distance that they have traveled up. Now, what I do know about genetics, a marking or a stripe, many factors will dictate how that marking or color will come out. One is genetics, but the other is environment and the feed. Depending on what you eat, more protein, more carbs, less carbs, the environment, if it's a wetland, if it's desert, will dictate or be part of that color pattern. So to be able to have two dogmen with the same color patterns, not only is it impossible, but you'd have to have them both in two enclosures, giving them the same amount of food, the same environment, the same everything. And then, obviously, you can't take away the genetic factor. So the dogman that he's seen, because of that detail, is the same dogman that we have up north, and that the other eyewitness also saw. So that detail just blew us away. And we've come in contact, a little circle, Donna, the other eyewitness, me, and Moronis. And we've talked about and gotten detail and stuff like that of those two dogmen.
Oh, yeah, I've got no doubts it has to be the same dogman. I think that's a little too ironic to think that it could possibly be another dogman that's black with those white markings on it. 103 miles is a pretty good distance. Do you have any theories on their migration patterns?
It's interesting. I mean, we've talked about it. Right now, it's just theories, but it could be they were probably either born in a certain spot, travel up north for food, or to explore, because they're young maybe, or young adults, and then travel back and forth. Moronis mentions that the last time he saw them, I think it was in March. We started seeing the same guy in June. So from March and June, he went from south to north in that time frame, whatever. If he went slowly, if he went fast, we don't know. So it could be for food, it could be for exploring territory. We do know that he travels up and then he goes back down, because Moronis has seen him multiple times in the south. So we know that fact, that he does go up and down.
It would only make sense for large predators like them to live that way.
I tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah, it would only make sense.
Right.
You know about a couple who say they were surrounded by 5 dogmen not all that long ago. Please share what you know about their experience with us.
Well, yeah, it's the same couple that Don had mentioned. They went hiking in an area in the Horicon when they spotted movement. The 5 dogmen surrounded them. The fiance kind of tucked her behind him, had her go back. He was armed. He had his gun. She went back to the truck, and he left the area as well. They both left because of it. Since that has not happened in our property, we're assuming that it was more of their little territory, or something was going on and they interrupted a hunt or whatnot, so they wanted them out of there. But they both got surrounded. Again, they both left. They didn't have anything happen that day. That's most of what I can say about them. I haven't gotten into details with them about that situation besides what I've just mentioned about that.
How scared are you of the dogmen that have come around your property?
It's an interesting question. I'm not terrified. It's more of a precaution. So if I do something, I do it because of precautionary reasons. I know the fact, because of their speed, that if they want to take me out, they can do that. It doesn't matter. Because of this, don't dwell on fear, because there's nothing I can do. I gotta go outside. I gotta feed the dogs. I gotta take them out. I gotta put them inside. I gotta go to work. I do go outside, and I first thing I do is look on top of the house, look on top of the trees, whatnot. But those are precautions. I don't tend to dwell on fear because there's no point in it because I can be taken out whenever they want to. So I tend to just respect their time when we are outside and we know that they're there. I'll finish up what I'm doing and I'll walk away back into the house, giving them that space. So I give them their space, and as of now, they're giving me my space.
I'm glad you've been able to stay so composed through all this. Most people would have had a Century 21 moment and gotten out of there. You've made some observations on Dogman growth rates. Please tell us what you've noted on that.
Sure. One of the things that the couple, which their encounter was in 2015, their height at 2015 was 5 foot and a half, give or take, obviously. 2017 is about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. So in those 2 years, he's grown a foot. And I asked him if you were to compare lean, built, or bulky, where would he be at in 2015? And she mentioned, well, he'd be between bulky and big. So he hadn't gotten to be bulky yet, or thick. Now he's bulky. So he definitely has grown in muscle mass and in height in those 2 years, which is a detail that we find interesting as there's not much we know about Dogman. But at least with this Dogman, we've been able to not only find out how much he travels, but how much he's grown since 2015, since the eyewitnesses saw him back then.
Yeah, being human, we're used to a certain growth rate. I guess with them, they grow so much faster than what we would expect. I guess it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but when you look at other animals, I guess it's not exactly unprecedented.
Right.
Well, it's about time for us to call it, Rick. Before we do, though, do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Well, for the people out there that have had encounters, fear is one thing that will always cause a reaction with any animal. Don't go messing with them. If you know you're being watched, ignore and walk out. Don't go chasing them if you do not like it. And stay safe out there. Like I said again, the most thing I can say is if you know they're there, even if you see one in front of you, turn around. Don't turn around completely. Make sure your eyes are on them, but just walk away. Fear is a trigger. I know it's hard. It's almost impossible when you see something this big. But if you can, talk to yourself. Talking to yourself helps you calm your nerves down and just walk away calmly. Don't run. Don't scream. Just walk away calmly.
Well, that sounds like good advice to me. Well, thanks again so much for coming on the show, Rick, and telling us about all those experiences. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Rick.
Well, thanks again so much for your time. Have a great night.
Hey, you too, Rick.
Thanks. Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.